The news hit like a punch to the chest. James Ransone, the actor who brought some of television's most unhinged, unforgettable characters to life, was suddenly gone. No warning, no build-up, just a name fans recognized instantly, followed by a headline no one expected to read. On screen, he was explosive, unpredictable, the kind of presence that made every scene feel like it could spin out of control at any second. When James Ransone showed up, things changed. He didn't play safe characters. He played people on the edge, men unraveling in real time. And somehow, he made them feel painfully real. But off-screen, his final chapter unfolded in silence. No public breakdown, no viral moment. Just a quiet ending that stood in sharp contrast to the chaos he portrayed so convincingly. Fans woke up to the news confused, stunned, and searching for answers. How does someone so intense, so visible, just vanish like that? How did one of the most talked about characters from The Wire end up leaving this world without most people even realizing he was struggling? As clips of his performances began circulating again, a chilling realization set in. Some scenes now felt different. He wasn't just acting broken, he understood it. And that raised a haunting question no one could shake. Was James Ransone showing us more of himself than anyone realized? For most people, James Ransone will always be remembered for one role, the one that changed everything. When The Wire aired its second season, viewers weren't prepared for Ziggy Sobotka. He wasn't a typical TV gangster. He was awkward, impulsive, desperate to be taken seriously, and constantly trying to prove he belonged in a world that never really accepted him. From the moment Ziggy appeared on screen, he felt different, uncomfortable, unstable, real. James Ransone didn't just play Ziggy, he embodied him. Every nervous outburst, every reckless decision, every moment of humiliation felt raw. There was no polish to the performance, no Hollywood shine. It was messy, emotional, and hard to watch in the best way possible. And that's exactly why it worked. Critics took notice immediately. Fans did too. Even though Ziggy only appeared in one season, his character became one of the most debated and remembered in the entire series. Some viewers hated him. Others felt sorry for him. But almost no one forgot him. Years later, people were still arguing about Ziggy online, about his choices, his breakdown, and the way his story ended. What made it even more striking was how young Ransone was at the time. This wasn't a seasoned star leaning on experience. This was a relatively unknown actor delivering a performance that felt disturbingly authentic. Many fans later said the same thing. It didn't feel like acting. It felt like watching someone slowly unravel. After The Wire, Ransone's name became tied to that role permanently. Directors knew he could handle dark material. Audiences knew he could go places other actors wouldn't. But with that recognition came something else, an expectation. From that point on, James Ransone wasn't just an actor. He was that guy, the one who played broken people better than almost anyone else. And while Ziggy Sobotka opened doors for him, it also set the tone for what came next. Because once Hollywood sees you as someone who can convincingly fall apart, that's often all they want to see you do. And that's where the pattern began to form. After The Wire, it looked like James Ransone was on the edge of something big. His performance had proven he could steal scenes, carry emotional weight, and leave a lasting impression. In another timeline, that should have launched him straight into the mainstream. But Hollywood had other plans. Instead of becoming a household name, Ransone slipped into a different lane, the one reserved for actors who are always working, always respected, but rarely celebrated. He showed up everywhere, just never at the center. Crime dramas, thrillers, gritty indie films. His face became familiar, even if his name didn't always ring bells right away. He popped up in shows like CSI, Burn Notice, Hawaii 5-0, and Third Watch. Solid projects, steady work, but almost always supporting roles. The kind of parts where you come in, make an impact, and then disappear again. To casting directors, he was reliable. To directors, he was intense. To the industry, he was useful, but not marketable enough to push as a star. Reports from people who followed his career closely suggest this pattern wasn't accidental. Ransone didn't fit the clean, polished image Hollywood loves to sell. He had an edge, a rawness. He looked like someone who'd lived a little too hard, and that authenticity was both his strength and his limitation. While some actors from The Wire used the show as a springboard into major fame, Ransone took a quieter path. Not because he disappeared, but because the spotlight never fully landed on him. He kept working, kept acting, kept delivering performances that felt grounded and unsettling, even when the projects themselves flew under the radar. To fans, it felt like he was constantly this close to a bigger breakthrough. One role away, one hit film away, but year after year, that moment never quite arrived. And while there's no public confirmation of how he felt about it, many viewers later wondered what that does to a person, especially someone who gave so much of himself to every role. Because when you're always visible but never truly seen, the pressure doesn't go away. It just changes shape. And as time went on, the roles he accepted began to tell a story of their own. As the years went on, a noticeable pattern started to emerge in the characters James Ransone was drawn to, or maybe the ones Hollywood kept handing him. They weren't heroes. They weren't clean-cut or optimistic. These were men living on the margins, carrying damage, secrets, and a sense that something inside them was constantly pulling them apart. And Ransone played them with a level of conviction that felt almost too real. In indie films like Tangerine, his performances were raw and uncomfortable, stripped of any glamour. In it, Chapter 2, he stepped into horror territory, bringing a grounded, unsettling energy that made the supernatural feel disturbingly human. And then came The Black Phone, where his presence again leaned into darkness, quiet, tense, and heavy, even when he wasn't speaking. What stood out wasn't just the genre. It was the emotional tone. Again and again, Ransone portrayed characters who were haunted, unstable, or barely holding themselves together. People online began to notice. Comment sections filled with similar thoughts. Why does he always play guys who feel broken? He makes pain look effortless. It's like he understands these characters on a deeper level. To be clear, there's no proof these roles reflected his personal life. Actors play parts, that's the job. But fans couldn't ignore how natural it seemed for him to slip into these troubled minds. It didn't feel forced. It didn't feel exaggerated. It felt lived in. Some viewers even went back to his earlier work and noticed the same energy there too. A nervous intensity. A sense of someone constantly fighting something invisible. The more people rewatched his performances, the more they felt like they were seeing a long, emotional through line, one that stretched across decades of work. And while these roles earned him respect among cinephiles and horror fans, they also seemed to quietly box him in. Hollywood knew exactly what to use him for. When a project needed someone believable in chaos, someone who could sell discomfort without overacting, James Ransone was the call. But playing darkness over and over can take a toll. At least, that's what many fans began to wonder later on. Because eventually, something else became impossible to ignore. The noise around his career faded, and the silence that followed raised even more questions. Then, almost without anyone realizing it, James Ransone seemed to fade into the background. Not in a dramatic way. There was no announcement. No headline about stepping away. Just less of him. Fewer interviews. Fewer public appearances. The kind of quiet absence that only becomes obvious in hindsight. Fans who had followed his work closely started noticing gaps. Longer stretches between projects, fewer updates, and a presence that felt increasingly distant. His social media didn't offer many answers either. When he did post, it was sparse. No big promotions. No personal explanations. Just brief glimpses that left more questions than clarity. Some followers described the tone as withdrawn. Others said it felt like someone keeping the world at arm's length. Again, nothing concrete, just impressions that lingered. Online discussions slowly picked up. Nothing loud or accusatory, just concern. People wondering if he was burned out, if years of playing dark characters had taken a toll, if the industry had quietly moved on from him. Rumors floated around forums and comment sections, with fans speculating about internal battles or private struggles. but it was always framed as guesswork. No confirmations, no statements, just unease. What made it more unsettling was that this kind of silence wasn't new in Hollywood. Viewers had seen it before. Actors who kept working until they suddenly didn't, people who stayed out of the spotlight, not because they wanted privacy, but because something deeper was going on. And that comparison made some fans uncomfortable. Still, most people assumed James Ransone was just living his life off camera, taking smaller roles, choosing projects carefully, staying out of the noise. After all, not every actor wants attention. Not every absence means something is wrong. But then the news broke, and in an instant, that silence took on a completely different meaning. When the news finally surfaced, it stopped people cold. James Ransone was gone. At just 46 years old, there was no build-up, no long public struggle that fans could point to afterward. One moment, he was an actor people assumed was still quietly working somewhere in the background. The next, his name was everywhere, attached to a story no one expected to read. Reports confirmed that authorities had responded to a call at a residence and completed an investigation. No foul play was suspected. Shortly after, official records listed the manner of death, sending shockwaves through everyone who had followed his career. The reaction was immediate and visceral. Fans of The Wire couldn't believe it. Horror audiences who had just seen him in recent projects were stunned. Many people said the same thing over and over. I had no idea he was struggling. That sentence flooded comment sections, timelines, and forums, highlighting the same uncomfortable truth. Whatever James Ransone was dealing with, he kept it deeply private. What made the news even harder to process was how recent his work felt. He wasn't a forgotten name from decades ago. He had appeared in The Black Phone and its follow-up, projects that introduced him to a whole new generation of viewers. To many, it felt like he was still in the middle of his story, not at the end of it. As the initial shock settled, a different conversation began to take shape. People weren't just mourning his loss. They were reevaluating everything they thought they knew about him. His performances, his silence, his intensity. Moments that once felt like acting now carried a heavier weight. And as tributes started pouring in, one thing became painfully clear. James Ransone had mattered to far more people than anyone realized. And now, they were only beginning to understand just how deep that impact went. Almost immediately after the news broke, fans began revisiting James Ransone's body of work. And suddenly, everything looked different. Scenes that once felt entertaining or intense now carried an extra layer of weight. Ziggy Sobotka's nervous breakdowns, the haunted eyes in it. Chapter 2, the tense silence in The Black Phone. All of it seemed to resonate on a deeper, almost unsettling level. People started commenting that he didn't just play broken characters. Somehow, he made their pain feel real, palpable, and unforgettable. Online, tributes poured in. Fans shared favorite scenes, clips, and lines, many remarking on how the characters he portrayed now seemed eerily reflective of his own struggles. Rewatching his performances became an exercise in hindsight. Laughter turned into discomfort, amusement turned into empathy, and admiration became something heavier, tinged with sorrow. Some commenters went as far as to say that the man behind the roles seemed more visible in his work than he ever was publicly. Others reflected on how the industry typecast him into darkness, almost as if audiences were unknowingly complicit in the repeated portrayal of his character's pain. The discussions weren't just about acting. They were about understanding the person behind the art and the quiet intensity he carried into every scene. For many fans, Ransone's legacy became bittersweet. His performances, once appreciated for their skill, were now mourned for the humanity they revealed. And with that, a question lingered over social media threads, comment sections, and tribute pages. How much of what we saw on screen was James Ransone channeling his own reality, and how much was simply his unmatched talent at making us believe it? It was clear that his work would continue to reach new audiences, and in revisiting it, people weren't just remembering an actor. They were reckoning with a legacy that was haunting, complicated, and impossible to forget. And yet, his story also raised a larger conversation. one about the pressures, the isolation, and the unseen struggles faced by many in Hollywood. James Ransone's story is a reminder that fame, talent, and recognition don't shield anyone from struggles that remain hidden behind the scenes. He gave audiences unforgettable performances, creating characters that stayed with us long after the credits rolled. Yet behind the intensity and the art was a person whose battles were mostly unseen, a life lived away from the spotlight that suddenly ended too soon. His legacy is complex. It's a mixture of admiration for his craft, sorrow for his loss, and reflection on how easily we overlook the humanity behind the roles we love. Fans will continue to revisit his work, discovering new layers and performances that now feel even more poignant. And in doing so, they keep his memory alive, not just as an actor, but as a person whose story touches on the struggles many face in silence. James Ransone may be gone, but the impact of his work, the conversations he sparks, and the performances he left behind will not be forgotten. His story challenges us to pay closer attention, to look beyond the screen, and to remember that even the brightest lights can carry unseen shadows. If you want more shocking news like this, subscribe to this channel.